Well, thank you very much, Flo, for that lovely introduction and for organising this so beautifully. We're all managed to make it in here, and we can all see each other, and you've set it up beautifully. So I think let's just start with a little bit of movement to get us started. I was doing some other kind of event earlier on, and one lady talked about how when we feel kind of a bit stressed and anxious, it can actually be hard to even be still to practice mindfulness. And so she was talking about the importance of kind of shaking a little bit, and even shaking our face and shaking our hands. But maybe let's just start by just shaking our hands a bit, giving a bit of a shake, and maybe giving your body a bit of a shake. If you want to do a little bit of a dance, you're very welcome to do that too. The good thing about mindfulness is you can include it, you can kind of connect it into whatever you want, and maybe just rolling your shoulders forwards a few times. Backwards. Oh, that feels good. And then taking some nice deep breaths in and just trying to touch your ears with your shoulders. All those with big ears have got the advantage here. And breathe out. And a nice deep breath in. And maybe closing your eyes this time, and then a nice big sigh as you breathe out. And the last one, you do it a bit more slowly. So really feeling your shoulders, trying to touch your ears with them, feeling the sensations of tension and tightness, and then a sense of letting go and coming into the moment. And just noticing how your body feels now, having done just a little bit of physical movement. Maybe just taking one of your hands and just massaging it with the other hand, just a little bit, just to feel that contact and that sense of touch. And then swap it the other way around. This bit, for some reason, feels very nice, so I like to massage it around there. It's probably one of those acupressure points. Feels really good, but I'll have to stop at some point. So that's nice. And then let's just close our eyes now, and just for a moment, or eyes open, whatever you prefer, but just allowing your body to be a little bit still, if that feels okay for you. And noticing how your breathing rate may have increased a little bit with that movement. Noticing the weight of your body on the chair, your feet on the floor, your back against the back of the chair. And just that sense of connecting to ground, and how the ground, whether you're in a flat or literally on the ground floor, ultimately we all come in touch with Mother Earth. And it was Earth Day recently. So let's just take a few moments as we sit here and connect to our bodies and to the ground. Just acknowledge that we are born from this planet, from the earth, and the food that we eat comes from there. We go back to there as well. So feeling a sense of gratitude for what the earth offers us. And part of what the earth offers us is the beautiful plants and trees that provide us the oxygen we're breathing right now. So as you naturally breathe in and out, just get a sense of receiving that oxygen from the world of plants and trees, from nature. And as you breathe out, knowing that nature takes that gas back in again as well. So being mindful of how every breath you take connects you to earth and to nature. I'll just stop talking for just 10 or 20 seconds and just allow you to practice in your own way. Good. And then when you're ready, just gently allowing your eyes to open, coming back to the session.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Shamash. Okay. I don't know about anyone else, but I immediately feel much calmer and more centered. So I just wanted to take a moment to introduce the event a little bit more fully now that we've all had a moment to ground and fully arrive. This event is called Resilience and Wellbeing in Times of Rapid Change, which I'm sure that we're all experiencing it in a kind of collective way, but also in our own individual lives as a result of the collective crisis experience that we're going through at the moment. And so Shamash and I really wanted to find ways to support people that are kind of feeling a bit overwhelmed at these times. There's so many kind of well-being and resilience approaches that can help people through these times. And so the purpose of this event is to really share Shamash's wisdom on these topics, and also offer you guys a chance to connect with each other and share the wisdom that you have on these topics as well. And this is the first in a kind of relaunched Wellbeing Together series run by the Network of Wellbeing. We offer these a series of webinars that we're going to run every few weeks, looking at different aspects of wellbeing, so particularly our kind of own mental health and resilience, as well as kind of how we're responding in our communities at the moment with kindness and connection, and also what kind of new perspectives are coming out of this time of rapid change. I'm really excited that Shamash is our first guest in this new series, because he's such an amazing mindfulness teacher, as you've kind of just had a taste of, and he's also the co-founder of a really amazing organisation called the Museum of Happiness, which also runs a lot of different events, usually in person in London, but at the moment, of course, online, so they're definitely worth checking out. And just before we go into speaking a bit to Shamash about some of the practices that he wants to share with you this evening, I just wanted to do a quick poll with you guys to find out a little bit about what you would most like to get out of this evening's event, because like I say, we want it to be as interactive as possible. So hopefully you'll see a poll appear on your screen and you can just choose as many of these options as you like. So the question is, what would you most like to get from this event? And it's kind of multiple choice: guided meditation, learning or new resources, minimizing stress, connecting to others, having fun. Now, the reason having fun is in there is because actually, Shamash and I were checking in about this before the call. We're very aware that this is a really challenging time in a lot of ways, and the reason that fun is in there is not to kind of minimize that. It's to be aware that although there are many challenges, there's also still opportunities to connect and to be light with each other and to share moments of joy and laughter, and in a way that's especially valuable in times of challenge, to feel that sense of joy and lightness. So and Shamash, I have to say, he's also a good friend of mine, and he's one of the most joyful people that I know, so it's an infectious sense of joy that I get connecting to Shamash. So I'm going to end that poll and we'll see what the results are.
Oh, new resources. Interesting.
Yeah. Okay, so it's quite, I mean, in a way that's good news for us, Shamash, because we were planning to include all of these. Yeah. But it's really helpful just to see where you guys are at. So yeah, especially learning new resources is something that
minimizing stress, having some fun, connecting with others.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Brilliant. So I think we're going to offer a chance for all of those aspects in this evening's event. We've got about 45 minutes left together. We're going to start I'm going to start asking Shamash a few questions so that he can share some of those resources, practices, approaches, and then we'll go to more interactive sections of the event later on. So thanks for taking part in the poll. And feel free to share comments or questions in the chat box as I'm talking to Shamash, because like I say, my colleague Roger will be kind of keeping an eye on the chat box and making a note of your questions that we'll come back to later. So first question for Shamash, as someone that's kind of really involved in kind of obviously a mindfulness teacher, really practicing happiness and well-being skills, what are you doing at this time when things can be quite stressful and challenging to kind of take care of your own mental health and well-being? Are there regular things you do or things that you'd recommend?
Yeah, well, I'll just share some of the things I've done. I'm not saying that I'm the perfect well-being or resilience ambassador or anything like that. To be honest, just to share, I found it really hard, especially the first couple of weeks when it was all coming, because I was following the news before all the lockdowns happened in the UK, and it was, I could see almost like a wave of challenge approaching the UK, and seeing how much suffering was going to come. And I was just trying to think, oh, what can I do to help? And all the things that I'd planned to be doing, I've put them out, thrown them out, and I was trying to work out, what's the best thing I should do. And I got this new whiteboard that I put up in my room, and I was like trying to work out ideas like, okay, these are my strengths, this is what people need. And I was in a fix-it mode for the first couple of weeks, and felt anxious for others actually. But as the time has gone by, in the last 2 or 3 weeks, I've come to get more of a sense of letting go and allowing things and going more with the flow. And I'll talk more about how that came about, perhaps fortunately, and how that kind of approach might be of help to others as well. So yeah.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you, Shamash. And I think that one important lesson that I've learned recently, actually attending an online event that you ran with Mark Williamson from Action for Happiness, was this understanding that it's actually okay not to be okay in this time. That I think it's very easy to put a lot of pressure on ourselves to be responding in a certain way or coping in a certain way, but just knowing that this is an unprecedented situation that we're all in together, and allowing ourselves giving ourselves kindness and patience in whatever way that we're finding to deal with that, and kind of minimizing judgment. So it's really helpful, I think, to hear from people like yourself that also share that, you're going through that as well, even though you've got all this kind of tools and training. It's a natural response.
Exactly. I really like that quote that you shared. And sometimes it's hard to be okay with not being okay. That's the challenge, because sometimes we feel good, sometimes we don't. And when we don't feel good, we also think there's something wrong, or we need to fix something. So that it also kind of builds a layer on top of that too. And I suppose small mindful exercises, talking to people, reflecting on it a bit more, and just giving it some time, and sometimes it passes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. And I know that there's a specific kind of framework approach that's been really helpful for you in general in your life, and perhaps specifically in this time, that's called acceptance and commitment therapy. And it would be really wonderful if you could kind of introduce that to everyone here, and maybe say what relevance you think it has in this kind of context of being in lockdown.
So it's quite interesting. So I've been into mindfulness for a long time, like over 20 years, and especially the last 10 years or so, I've been using the approaches, the science-based approaches, which are kind of these 8-week courses quite often, and training others to teach that. And these programs, and most people when they learn about mindfulness, they're very much focused on mindfulness practice, like being in the here and now, being in the moment, and also kind of focused on kind of being on being mode and letting go, and nothing to do about what action you need to take. And something felt wrong. In fact, with those programs, they also were very fixed programs. They're like, you need to do this on week 1 and this on week 2, and this is mindfulness and this isn't. So quite prescriptive. So something didn't ever feel right about that, actually. I loved a more creative approach to mindfulness. And then I came across a program that I'd researched a while back, and the acronym is ACT, and it can stand for Acceptance and Commitment Therapy, or Acceptance and Commitment Training. And I'll share a little bit about the story, because the guy who developed it, I'm so inspired by him. He's almost like a hero of mine. He's really into science, and his discovery of it really inspired me to learn more about it and practice it. And it's kind of quite relevant to this context. So if you don't mind, I'll just share that story. So this chap, now he's Dr. Stephen Hayes. He was a student, and he was starting to lecture as well, and he was at university and teaching psychology. And he was in a room, and there were these 2 senior psychologists, having an argument. And he was watching these guys having this really terrible argument, and he wanted them to stop. He felt very, very anxious. His heart started beating really fast for the first time. So he was kind of starting to feel overwhelmed by this anxiety, but he'd never had this experience. So he put his hand up to say, stop fighting. So they both turned to him. These senior professors looked at this little kid and said, what do you want with your hand up? And he wanted to say, stop fighting, but his heart was beating so fast, the words didn't come out of his mouth. And he felt really embarrassed by that. And he felt very trapped in this room. And unfortunately, these kind of episodes kept repeating. But he was, he was in a psychology school, so he knew all the techniques. There was an equivalent of a CBT techniques where you challenge your negative thoughts. There were special meditation and relaxation techniques you could use. And he used all these techniques, and none of them seemed to work ultimately. So even for a whole 3 years, no matter what he did, the anxiety kept coming back. And so eventually he found himself one day, he woke up in bed in the middle of the night and his arms really aching. So he was convinced, okay, this is not like a panic attack. This is definitely a heart attack. He almost felt pleased about it because he was so stressed about the whole situation. So he imagined in his mind calling 911. It was in the US. But instead of actually doing it, his mind was commanding him to phone the number. But another part of his mind started visualizing what would happen. And it visualized him, calling 911, the ambulance coming, taking him to the hospital, being in bed. And then he imagines himself opening his eyes and a doctor smiling as he came to him, saying, Dr. Hayes, I've got some good news. You didn't have a heart attack. It was just a panic attack. And his heart really sunk in that visualization because it was so painful for him, and it was at the lowest of the low. So he found himself on the floor at like 2 a.m. or something in his bedroom, and he had what I would describe, and I think he would describe it too, as a spiritual experience. And for the first time in all those years, he realized he was not his thoughts. There was a part of him that observed his thoughts commanding him. He calls him the dictator. The dictator within was telling him, you're not good enough. You need to do this. You need to get rid of this anxiety. Can't put yourself together. But he's like, actually, no, I don't have to do that. You're just a voice in my head, and I get to choose what actions I do, not you. You may be able to be a dictator. You can say what you want in my head, but I get to choose what I want to do. And he just knew intuitively from that moment that his life was going to change, and it did. And through that discovery, this was back in a time when people didn't even use the word mindfulness, and to talk about a psychologist using it would be totally out of the question. So he did a couple of studies. They were randomized studies. They were successful, but he didn't publish them. And he did a lot of underlying studies, and he really went in a very thorough scientific way, worked out what are the core processes that helped him to heal. And one of the things he discovered about this spiritual experience is that people used to think 1 person in a million has this experience, but actually it's much more often, like 1 in 3 people or 1 in 2 or something. It's a very common experience. And actually it's a key skill. So he actually did all this research, and together with his team, they discovered 6 core processes, which if we cultivate, lead to a meaningful life, a rich life. And so this therapy was born, this therapy was developed. And it's called acceptance and commitment training, as I said, and it's got these 6 processes. But the aim of the therapy is to cultivate a rich and meaningful life. So, I helped to start the Museum of Happiness, and, you guys are called the Network of Wellbeing. And it can sometimes feel as if we have to feel a certain way. So, if we are anxious, if we are sad, if we are depressed, it feels as if we're doing something wrong. But actually what ACT is saying is that it's not about how you're feeling. Life is about cultivating a life that's meaningful, a life that's purposeful, a life that's rich. And the idea is that you do not need to fix yourself, because there's this part of you that's observing the stress, that's observing the anxiety, that's observing the depression, that's observing the chronic pain or whatever. And it's not it. So you are not that. And so I loved it for that reason as well, because it's not about trying to feel a certain way. Most therapies have the aim of symptom reduction, for example, but ACT is one of the only therapies in the world that I know of where the aim is not symptom reduction, it's just a side effect. And if you get that side effect, great. If you don't get it, it doesn't matter. So it's about cultivating these 6 processes, come together, and they cultivate a thing called psychological flexibility. And so what you found is that the more people have psychological flexibility, the more resilience they have, the more well-being they have. In fact, high psychological flexibility can predict, or low psychological flexibility can predict whether or not you'll have a mental health challenge. if you do have a mental health challenge, how long it will last for, how deep the experience will be, how likely you are to get involved in addictions. All these kinds of things can be predicted through this one measure, psychological flexibility. And the other thing that really amazed me is that there's 3,000 studies on psychological flexibility. So I call it like a super skill for emotional well-being. And very, very few people know about it. In fact, the scientists are arguing that there's probably more evidence for psychological flexibility than even what we hear about quite often with positive psychology. And in a way, they kind of overlap with each other and they match with each other. But I think a lot more people need to know about this amazing skill and this amazing thing that we can measure very easily with 6 or 7 questions. So that's that. The other reason I really like ACT is that the developer, Stephen Hayes, he made it kind of like open source. So most therapies, they have this top therapist and he's like at the top of the pyramid, and then he trains his top people, and then they train other people, and you have to go through a specific program to learn it. He said, no, we're not going to have any hierarchy. We're not going to have any official certification. I'm going to make it available to everyone. The information's available to everyone. You could learn it from a book and start sharing it. You could learn it on a webinar at the Network of Wellbeing and start sharing it with clients if you want. There's no fixed certification for this. You know, the more training you do, the more you'll be able to share it with others. And because of that, it's become a really flourishing scientific community, and people apply it in a very creative way. And I'm talking for quite a long time. The last thing I want to say, the other beautiful thing and how it's very different to other therapies is it's not a fixed program. So it's not yet another 8-week program, 6-week program, 4-week program. It's worked out the processes which underlie all programs in a way, because it's worked out those processes that make the transformation, the difference. And then they say, apply your creativity, apply your energy, and you can mix and match this with whatever other approaches that you like. So what pops into my head is I know some people do mindful photography, for example. So then that's great. So you can have a program which is mindful photography and ACT, or just mindful photography, and it could have all the different processes in there in different ways. And so that would be transformational for someone through that. Another person may want to do, you know, mindful nature programs. If they bring these processes in, however they wish, they've got some evidence behind what they're sharing and doing. So yeah, that's what ACT is, and that's why I'm passionate about it.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing, Shamash. It's really brilliant to hear a bit more about how it came about, actually, for the story of its background and the massive impact that it can have. I guess we're going to go on to kind of putting ACT into practice through a guided meditation with Shamash. But just before we move into that, maybe you could just say a little bit more about psychological flexibility in terms of the steps of ACT, just to give everyone a kind of bit of a clear picture of what's involved in the model before we go on to putting it into practice. Sure.
I'll show. So I'll share my screen. I'll share a couple of diagrams. So can you all see that one? I think you probably can. So can you see that? Yeah. Cool. So this is a simplified model, and if you take one thing away from this, to improve your psychological flexibility, you focus on these 3 things: being present, staying open, and taking values-based action. So the thing at the top of this triangle, be present, has got kind of these 2 elements. So it's about being in the here and now, but it's about being flexibly in the here and now. So it's about learning to be present and focused, for example, if I'm sharing this presentation, but it's also learning to open up your attention. If someone calls your name, and you need to be able to have an open attention. So being flexible in the way you practice your mindfulness, not just in meditations, but in everyday living, when you're connected with nature, when you're talking to someone. So there's that element. And that I, which is kind of above the mountains, that represents the transcendent self. So tuning into that part of yourself, which is observing yourself, the observer, the witness, that part of you that's silent, that's peaceful, that's completely pure, perfect, and complete. Some people call it awareness or consciousness or the observer self. But the amazing thing is that's both a spiritual concept, but by very high quality and hardcore science, they've found that having this ability to have a different perspective of who you are. So you are not your story, you're not your past with all that stuff that's happened, but you're the observer of all that. It's very healthy and is part of being present. Staying open is about learning to step back and actually observe your thoughts and feelings as just thoughts and feelings, but also learning to receive your feelings as a gift. So that talk that we had about it's okay to not be okay, that's an example of staying open, of making space internally for the feelings to arise and to meet them with kindness. And we do that not because if we like them, because who likes feeling anxious or feeling sad? You probably don't like it. But if you try to push it away or you try to reject it, it will just strengthen. So you do the best you can to internally open up to it and to treat it honorably as a guest that's come to visit you, because that's the best way to meet it and to learn from it and for it to ultimately pass. And the final part of this triangle is I've drawn a heart there with a door, because it's about meaningful action. So it's learning about what your values are, taking values-based action. So my values are learning and teaching, about creativity, about being playful and fun. And if I'm doing that when I'm doing any activity in the here and now, the present moment, it will become rich and meaningful. And most mindful programs, they focus on these two, but they don't appreciate the importance of working out what our values are and about taking action based on those values as well in the moment. So that's a nice simplified model of ACT, which gives you a good sense of what I'm talking about, I think, hopefully.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant and really helpful to see it visually in that way. So thank you for sharing, Shamash. It would be really lovely if anyone wants to share any kind of comments or reflections or even questions in the chat. Like I say, Roger's keeping an eye on the questions that are coming up in the chat as we go through, and we'll come to some of them at the end. But now I'd love us to move along together with Shamash into kind of putting ACT into practice. So I'm going to invite Shamash to kind of guide another quite short practice of about 5 minutes, but then I know afterwards we're going to have a bit more interaction in terms of journaling and reflection. Is that right, Shamash?
Yeah, well, yeah, good idea. Yeah, so in total about 7 or 8 minutes, is that okay? Yeah, okay, cool. So yeah, let's do a little visualization. Quite enjoy doing this one, and it's using not all the skills of ACT, but some of them, which is nice. So this is more of a reflective exercise. So like we did before, maybe just having a little bit of a stretch and move your body a little bit, just to maybe wake yourself up a little bit for this practice. It can be quite a wonderful and powerful one. That's good. Yeah, it's nice to see a lot of you stretching. And then get yourselves nice and cozy. This is a time for you. You're doing this in your own time, and you're choosing to be here. So getting yourself nice and cozy and allowing your eyes to just gently close if that feels good. And being aware of the sensations of your body and appreciating whenever you feel the body, you're always in the present moment. If you feel confused about how to be in the here and now, just feel your body on the chair, your feet on the floor. Maybe just gently rub your thumbs and fingers together if you're struggling to be present. And that brings you into the here and now in a very gentle, in a very friendly way. Good. Now let's just spend a few moments just being in the here and now, being present, listening to the sound of my voice, the other sounds in the room, but not like you normally try to concentrate, just allow the sounds to come to you. Remember, we're talking about this sense of psychological flexibility. Listen in a flexible way, a gentle way. And if there's lots of thoughts, we don't fight the thoughts in ACT, we let them be, we make space for them. Now when you're ready to do so, I invite you to bring to mind someone who represents wisdom and kindness. Someone who you feel really at ease with, and you feel this person represents a sense of wisdom and compassion. And maybe someone's popped into your head already, or maybe not. It could be some sort of spiritual leader or other leader. It could be someone who's alive in the past, maybe not be around now. It could be a family member, it could be a friend, it could be one of the members of the network of well-being, whoever it is for you. So bringing that person to mind. And once you think of someone, or even if it's someone who you kind of vaguely know, bringing that person, visualizing as best you can, and imagine what it would be like to be with this person who's wise and kind. So you look into their eyes, they look back at you, and you just feel very much comforted. You feel fully accepted for who you are. And now I'd like you to bring to mind a challenge that you're going through at the moment. Maybe some problem, some difficulty, something you're trying to solve. Maybe it's something in your own life or some concerns you have for someone else. And I invite you to share that problem, that challenge, that concern with this wise and kind person. Imagine sharing your problem with this person of wisdom, and just imagine how they would listen to you. They would listen very carefully, very kindly. They'd really want to understand the problem you're going through. And then they may respond. So I'll give you a few moments to share that question, that problem. Imagine sharing it with them. And imagine the conversation that you'd have and what this person would say back to you. And then you may have some follow-up questions or some other questions you want to ask, and you may be thinking, wow, this is fantastic. Or maybe it's not so easy for you, this visualization, but however it's going, maybe asking another question, and the answer may be a feeling, it may be a thought, it may be an idea, it may be a color, who knows. Allow yourself to be open to the response that this being gives. And then once your conversation is finished, then you can thank them for coming along and remembering any insights that you may have had from chatting to this person. And knowing that that person is actually part of you. This wisdom is not coming from outside of you, it's part of you actually. So if you want, you can even imagine that door to your own heart, that picture I showed you. You can imagine that person stepping back into your heart, because of that wisdom and compassion is accessible and inside of you. And then when you're ready to do so, just gently allow yourself to come out of that little visualization and coming back to our surroundings. And what we're going to do is a little journaling activity. So you're going to need ideally a bit of paper and pen. You could do this on your phone, but it does work a bit better with a paper and pen. So maybe just grabbing a paper and pen if you don't have one. I'll just wait for a few moments. And once you've got that, I'll explain a little bit more. Great. Good to see Megan from Australia here. Wow. Okay, so once you've got your bit of paper and pen, I'm going to time 1 minute. And in this journaling exercise, the idea is that you keep writing. So you're not allowed to stop writing. So it's almost like a flow of consciousness. So if you're writing and you don't know what to write, just write down, I really don't know what to write. I don't know why Shamash is making me write when I don't know what to write. And the other thing that I'm writing is this. You just have to keep writing a flow of consciousness. So allow the thoughts to keep coming out. And I invite you to just write about your experience that we had just now. So think about the little visualization or meditation we did right now and the challenge that you brought up and however you found it. And for 1 minute, just to write down the flow of consciousness. Okay, so 1 minute in your journal, keep writing, ready, steady, go. don't want to, if you're not sure what to write, just write anything, but keep writing. 20 seconds to go. And stop it there. Very good. So you may have had all sorts of different insights in there, and we may be able to explore them a little bit later on in the session. But I invite you later on to read back at it and again, time yourself for a minute and underline any key points or any key insights. And it's a nice technique to get some quick insights about what your unconscious thinks. But yeah, that was a little exercise, a little act exercise to look at problems from a different perspective, connecting to that transcendent self I was talking about.
Thank you so much, Shamash. That was wonderful. And yeah, would really love to hear how that was for people. But I think in order to give everyone a chance to kind of connect with each other, we're going to move along now to getting into smaller groups to have interactive discussions with each other. And what we're going to invite you to do in those smaller groups is to just briefly introduce yourself. You'll be in a smaller Zoom room like this, just with 3 or 4 people, and I'll just automatically, you'll just get a button. Many of you have probably had this before, but you'll just get to say yes, you'll go into the room. That will happen automatically, then you'll come back automatically. You'll have three kind of things to share with each other in those rooms. 1, introducing yourself, saying hello. 2, just checking in with each other, you're kind of how you're doing, and sometimes this can be nice to do in a kind of internal weather report, like, oh, it's been a bit cloudy, or oh, I'm feeling quite sunny, if that resonates with you. Otherwise, just saying kind of how you are. And number 3, what's helping you at this time? So like I mentioned earlier, I think everyone here has probably got their own kind of wisdom, their own techniques that are helping them, and in that you can kind of maybe share and reflect if some of the practices that Shamash has shared this evening are kind of helpful for you and things you might want to try, or if other things are helping you, but just to kind of share your reflections and your wisdom with each other. So yeah, introduction, how you are and what's helping you. So I will split you into those breakout rooms now, and I think we'll have around 5 minutes of discussion, so just make sure to hear from each voice in the room. Give yourself a minute or 2 per person. So yeah, without further ado, I will move you to those rooms. See you in 5 minutes or so. So just to check, is there anyone still in this main room with me here? I can see a few people on the screen, but if you are, you might just need to unmute to say hello. If not, no worries. So welcome back to those that are rejoining the main room now. I hope that you had lovely discussions and connections with each other in those smaller rooms. Everyone will have got a little pop-up saying you've got 60 seconds to come back, so we'll just wait for the rest of the group to rejoin before we move on. But just to let you guys know that we're already here, we're going to move on to kind of Q&A for Shamash and sharing a bit from you guys in the last 10 minutes or so that we've got. So yeah, I see everyone joining back. Lovely to see you all reappearing. Jenny Jones says that was great, thanks. Great to hear you had good discussion, Jenny. I meant to mention to you guys earlier that there's a little reactions button at the bottom of Zoom, hopefully that you can see kind of on the right of the chat box. So maybe if you had a good discussion, you can give a little thumbs up or a little clapping. I see Lisa putting her thumbs up and Jane having a little clap, Cheryl having a little clap, Josh having a little thumbs up. So brilliant to see. Shamash, big thumbs up there. Lovely to see all of you guys. I think it's so valuable to connect with each other about and just tap into what we're all genuinely doing in this time, because even in just the connection, it can really help us, and then you might hear something that really resonates with you, even just in that shared understanding. So thank you very much for taking part in those group discussions. I think we've got pretty much everyone back now. So for the last 10 minutes or so, we wanted to move towards questions for Shamash about what he shared this evening. So in order to kind of start off the Q&A section of the evening, I'm going to go over to my colleague Roger. I'm just going to unmute you, Roger, and ask you to give a summary of what the kind of questions, the main questions that have been coming up in the chat box have been this evening. Any particular ones you think would be helpful for Shamash to answer for the group now?
We've had a whole series of questions, which has been really great, and they've fallen into lots of different categories, lots of different aspects of ACT. Some people, I mean, Suzanne asked some quite technical questions about ACT. Sounds a bit like what Eckhart Tolle described in his book, The Power of Now. Are these related, these concepts? Nirmal asked, how does ACT's acceptance component stand differently from the DBT's radical acceptance concept? Are they one and the same? So there's a whole lot of quite detailed questions. And then there are some questions about how ACT relates to particular individuals. One, Catherine asked, does it help me stop procrastinating? George says he has a aphantasia and so struggles with visualization. Are there alternatives to that aspect of the program? I don't know if you want me to stop there, and there's others relating to the community development, all sorts of stuff's been asked.
Well, I'll pause you there, because all of those questions are maybe quite specific around, well, a lot of them are quite specific around the model. So perhaps Shamash could have a go at answering a few of those, and then we could have some other questions on the community kind of applications of it. Thanks, Roger.
Sure. So with Eckhart Tolle, I have read his book, The Power of Now. I didn't decide to read it later. I didn't read it yet. So, and one of the things that Eckhart Tolle emphasizes is about the importance of presence, and he does. I mean, his moment of transformation, his spiritual experience when he was in the depth of depression and close to suicide was similar to what Dr. Stephen Hayes had, right? He discovered that there's a part of himself that can observe his thoughts. So this is not ACT or Eckhart Tolle or this or that. They're all pointing towards a universal human insight, which is we can actually observe our thoughts, we can observe our emotions, we can step out from ourselves and observe what's going on, and we can also be more connected in almost a spiritual way to everything as well. There's so many people have had that sense of looking at sunset and feeling completely connected with everything, or whatever it is, the stars. So yes, it's similar to that. The radical acceptance from DBT, in mindfulness, there's three main therapies. There's mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, there's DBT, and then there's the ACT, which I've been talking about. The DBT I haven't studied so much, but I can hazard a guess that ultimately acceptance means acceptance. So, you know, all these different models are pointing to acceptance. They almost mean the same thing. And we use different language or different words to try to point to what we're doing. what we're trying to talk about. Just to very quickly to explain a beautiful metaphor, I think, for what acceptance is about. So imagine it's pouring with rain and you need to run to, let's say, a train station or something. Now the rain is the rain, and you're going to get wet if you go to that train station. One attitude is like, oh no, it's raining, and then kind of crunching yourself up, being very frustrated, getting soaked, and being annoyed by the fact that you got soaked with rain. The acceptance approach is to say, okay, I don't like rain, but it is raining and I'm going to get wet, but I'm going to be fully open to it. I'm going to walk, briskly to the station. And if I get wet, I get wet, and maybe I'll learn something. Maybe there'll be something about it I enjoy. So there's that sense of not fighting with the present moment experience because it's already there. So that's the acceptance we're talking about. Procrastination, I'll talk about that later. No, I'm joking. Procrastination, one of the tricks that's really helped me for procrastination is that it's to do with motivation, and it's to do with fear. So what I do, because I procrastinate about practicing meditation, because of sometimes I really want to do it and sometimes I don't. So now I've had a breakthrough on that, in that I give myself a minimum of 1 breath meditation. So every day I practice for a minimum of 1 breath. If I want to practice more, great. And if I don't want to, that's fine too. And it works the same with procrastination. If there's something you really need to do, just do it for 10 seconds, do it for 60 seconds, do it for a minute or two, and you'll bypass that part of your brain that's telling you not to do it or trying to avoid it. And so I found that works personally for me. And finally, the visualization question is a good one too. Not everyone can visualize equally and at the same level, and that's fine. I've just shared one exercise of literally hundreds, if not thousands, of ACT exercises. There's no limit to the amount of ACT exercises that can be created from the model, because you just learn the principles and you can make up any exercise from it. So don't have time today because we're finishing in a few minutes, but I will share some links to all the many different exercises that you could try out.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks so much, Shamash. And I know that it's Joe Norfolk has asked in the chat, how can I learn more about ACT, which we will come to in the closing of this event and send some follow-up information to everyone, so that you can kind of, if this has really resonated with you, or if you just want to kind of explore it further, then we'll send you some easy ways to do that from Shamash's expertise. So maybe to kind of just do one more kind of round of questions, I'll hand over to Roger again to share if there are any. You mentioned that there are maybe some specific questions around kind of community application, so maybe just a few more questions from you, Roger, to I'll unmute you.
Let's get 3 actually, if I can.
Yeah,
I'll get 3 if I can, Flo. One is a couple that are related to practical applications. Is there a way we can link ACT to community development work? That was from Jane. Prahalad asks, what about applying ACT for school teachers? Is there anything special we could say about that? Because many of them need new skills and balancing their personal and professional lives more than ever they've done before. Finally, Annette asks, because you talked about psychological flexibility, I'm going to throw this one in because just make sure we get everybody's questions in. Annette asked, how do you measure psychological flexibility?
Okay, so I'll start with the last one. How do you measure psychological flexibility? There is a questionnaire that's been very well tested, which has just, I think, 7 questions on it, and you just score yourself on a scale from, I think, 1 to 7 or something. You just add those numbers up and it gives you a score, and you get a measure of your psychological flexibility. And the guy who developed it, Dr. Stephen Hayes, he's got some other creative ways of measuring it too. So I'll share links for ways to measure it. The second last one was about school teachers. Yes, there's been a whole bunch of work on ACT in schools. And the exciting thing is that I think they've released some of the training to be free, even though they've spent years and spent a lot of money on it. So I'll again share a link to a couple of books on ACT for children. They're really fun and very creative ways of helping children to learn about ACT. And there's also a specific program. I can't remember how many weeks it is, but that's something that's been tested on children, which you could try. And then finally, with the community development, the beauty about ACT is it can be used at different levels. So not just on the individual or the group or in companies, or for people who have won Olympic medals through applying ACT, but it has been used in communities and countries too. I don't know if I could describe how specifically it could be applied to communities, but there's stories for example, it's being used in refugee camps around the world. So I think it's the World Health Organization or the United Nations, they've come up with a 4 or 5 week program to train people who work with refugees. And they tested that model, and then they got them to educate people in refugee camps who are really struggling, using ACT to help them to manage that really difficult situation in the best way possible that they could. And it had good results, and it was published in The Lancet, which is one of the best places to publish this kind of quality research. So it's most likely to be rolled out around the world. I'm not sure if that exactly answers your question, but it can certainly be used in community development.
Yeah, thank you, Shamash. And it's really helpful to hear the different ways that ACT has been applied in different contexts. So we're moving towards the end of our time together. It's been so lovely to have Shamash as our guest and all of you interacting with us this evening. Actually, it's quite apt that we end on the point of kind of community, because this, like I mentioned at the beginning, this is the first in a series of Network of Wellbeing webinars, and the next one will be on the 12th of May, and that will be looking at what we can learn from kind of community responses to the current corona crisis. We've seen lots of people respond with such incredible kindness, such connection, and actually in kind of really new and innovative ways, like new networks being set up. So we're going to have, I guess, Karen Creven from the Active Wellbeing Society and a few other organisations joining too, to share kind of lessons learned in this ongoing situation. So yeah, would be lovely if any of you want to join that. And again, I'll send the link in the follow-up email. And I know that Shamash has got some other online events and trainings coming up that you can briefly mention now, maybe, Shamash, and we'll also include those links in the follow-up email as well.
Yeah, so I've developed like a 5-week online course. It's called ACT for Beginners, and I think it starts in 5th or 6th of May or something. So I'll share a link, and I'll share a discount code as well. So if anybody wants to do that, you can get involved and learn it that way. Yeah.
Brilliant. So yeah, so expect an email. Well, yeah, likely, if not tomorrow, early next week, with all of the links and resources, etc. And really hope to see you guys at future Network of Wellbeing webinars. Maybe to finish, we can you can choose to put your view on gallery view if it's not already, and we can all just give each other a wave so we can see everyone saying goodbye for the evening. Thanks so much for your time and energy and enthusiasm this evening, and especially thank you, Shamash, for sharing.
We can clap for each other and ourselves and for the world.
That too. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you, Flo. Thursday night claps.